Hey guys, are you ready to transform your mind so you can transform your life? Coach Mirna brings you one-on-one coaching and expert guests weekly to help you to grow. Because happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy goal.
Looking for personal growth? Let's do it. Welcome back to Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, life coach Mirna Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Cynthia Starr, author of Starving, Binging, Purging, the true story of how I recovered from an eating disorder, and you can too. And today, Cynthia and I are going to be talking on the topic, how to recover from eating disorders. So, if this manifests with you at all, if this is some kind of, you know that you're eating when you shouldn't, that you're binging after you eat a lot, then I encourage you to stick around to the end so you can, hear Cynthia's story and how she recovered. So welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you, Mirna. I'm happy to be here.
You're very welcome. I'm happy to have this conversation. All right. So let me give you guys a brief synopsis of Cynthia's book. Driven by the pursuit of perfection and the desire to be truly loved and accepted, Cynthia battled an eating disorder for 13 long years. Starving, Binging, Purging is her raw, authentic story, told firsthand, a story not just of suffering, but of resilience, victory, and hope against all odds. In this book, Cynthia openly explores the complex issues of anorexia, bulimia, purging, food addiction, and shares the immediate, intimate details of her journey to reclaim her life. She also includes 21 crucial recovery lessons to help those suffering from eating disorders heal and win their own battles. Yeah. When I hear of eating disorders, my mind goes directly to Princess Diana, who had bulimia and who it was one of the faces of eating disorder. So, as we dive in, Cynthia, in your book, you shared that your brothers mistreated you and that your dad abandoned your family. Do you think that your childhood trauma is where your eating disorder started? Because it usually does.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It was the perfect setup for an eating disorder, quite frankly. Along with those things, my mother set up food battles, I guess, at a very young age with me. Not intentionally. I mean, there was no intention on her part. She was doing what she was raised. And, during that time, you ate what was on your plate and you didn't leave the table until everything was gone and things were set in front of me that I didn't like. And at a fairly young age, I was a little obstinate, strong-headed, if you can imagine. And it became her will against mine. So that was, in the very, very early years. And so at that point, without realizing it, I was taught how food can be used as a control weapon. That's a big part of it. And then with the abandon issues and my brothers mistreating me, bullying me. And I think it was all absolutely a setup for what happened in later years.
Okay, so take me through that so, I can connect with some of the listeners. So I grew up where you had to eat all the food on your plate, but because we were poor, and even my grandmother would say, you're starving kids, you better eat.
Yeah.
So,
oh, yeah.
I mean, let's start with that. Let's unpack that one first. So what did your mom, why did she want to make you eat? Is that she was giving you vegetables and you didn't want to eat it, or what was the deal there?
Well, I remember eggs, not liking eggs. I talk about that in the book. That's how the book starts, about how I was sitting at the table, swinging my legs and, with the eggs in front of me. And I could sit there for hours because I didn't like eggs. And I couldn't move off the chair and go play until I ate my eggs. And so, that's where the battle became, because I don't like eggs, or I don't like liver and onions. I don't like spinach. So therefore, I'm not going to eat them. And so that's how the battle between my mother's will and mine, and in my little mind, my own mind, I knew that I could outlast her. that, okay, I'm not going to eat that food. I don't like it and I'm not going to eat it. So that's, that's what happened. And yes, it was, you have to eat everything on your plate. Obviously, that's what she fixed. That's what's in front of you. Or, you just sit there, and that's what I remember. And the sad part about it was, of course, my mother had no intention of setting me up for an eating disorder or even meaning me any harm. She just did what she had been taught to do and probably what was done with her, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Well,
it.
well, that's a lot to unpack there. I mean, it's really interesting that, parents can damage their kids with the best intentions, because I grew up with the same philosophy, and my daughter wouldn't eat her broccoli or whatever. And yeah, you let them, they normally do outlast you though, because you can sit there for hours and would touch it. And what can you do? After a while, you should just get up and go to your bed or go to your room or something. Yeah. So, but what I was thinking though is that you talked, your book is about starving, binging, and purging. So at any point in time, did you eat that egg and then decide to go throw it up? Or did that happen later on?
That happened later on. Okay. At that point, it was just laying the foundation for using food as a control weapon, unbeknownst to me, unbeknownst to my mother. But as I wrote the book and as I uncovered things as I went along and, really put everything in one place when I wrote it, I was able to look back and go, wow, I was the poster child for an eating disorder. Everything that could have set me up for one did. And an eating disorder, for those that don't have one or don't struggle with it, in my opinion, the main thing underlying, if you were to take back all the layers, all the things under it, the baseline starts, in my opinion, with its control. It's a way that maybe around me I felt out of control, especially as I got older and chaos ensued in our lives. That was the one thing in my life that I learned that I could control and nobody else could make me do it or not do it. And so control is a huge, huge element in an eating disorder.
Wow. I want to unpack that later on, but not and set the foundation. So, all right. So your mom wouldn't let you get up from the table until you ate your eggs. And I will probably be a mother that does that too, because eggs are good for you. So I can understand where she was coming from. Right. But how did your brothers mistreating you and the abandonment issue, is that where you started to use, because that's where I'm thinking it's going, that you started to use food as an emotional comfort thing? Is that what happened there?
Yes. So when I was young, and I go into some of the memories in the book of sitting on my dad's lap at the breakfast table and him feeding me bites of his soggy cereal. And, I kind of set the table for what that was. And then when he abandoned us and left us, and my love of my dad and my entire life trying to get his approval and his love and feeling like unless I was perfect, then if I was perfect, maybe he would love me the way that I needed him to love me or wanted him to love me. And a good portion of my life was spent trying to do that very thing. And then my brothers, since my dad abandoned us and my mom was a single mom back in the 60s with 3 children, no child support, no help, no Medicaid, nothing. She did it all by herself with 3 children. And consequently, we were left alone quite a bit. And there was not a male figure during a good portion of it to stop my brothers. We were left alone. So we were unsupervised because my brother was 4 years older than me. And the other one was 2 years old. So we're kids left to themselves. I mean, kids do mean things. And if they're not stopped, particularly, if you're stronger than someone and bigger than someone, and they were mean to me and they got away with it. And that caused me to kind of go into myself and to put up really big walls around myself, and so that nobody could get in, because that was my safe space, was in me, and whatever you do to me or say to me, you can't hurt me while I'm inside of myself. And that, I also think, is another big thing under eating disorders, is that mentally, the longer you go with it, the more inside of yourself you become. And that's where you live, and that's where you dwell, and that's where the sickness or the mental, I call it a mental wound. I don't really like to call it mental illness. It can become that, and mine did. And then you dwell in that space, and it's isolating, and you live in secrecy, and you live in lies, and you live so deep inside of yourself that you lose touch with reality, and that's what the binging becomes, is an escape from reality, an escape from, for me it did. So yeah, that's
Okay. All right. So I'm getting that. All right. So it sounds like your eating disorder started later on in life because of these childhood wounds.
Yeah.
Your mom trying to use food as control, your brothers, your mom, that kind of thing. And what you're saying is because you went inside, sooner or later, then you probably tried to feed that inner child. That's where I'm going with it. Okay. So when did this cycle, of starving yourself, then binging, and then eating, then throwing it up, which is what purging is, when did that manifest itself in your life?
Sure. The binging started first, and that was when I was probably 12, 13 years old, at a fairly young age. And so, like I said, I had gone into myself, and then the abuse from my brothers, the mistreatment, I guess, continued through parts of that. And so it was my escape. And then my mother was going through her own difficulties, her own challenges. She was a victim of her own life, raising an abusive father. So she had 3 kids to raise, and, nobody to help with the burden. My uncle did come with us for a while, but so again, being left alone quite a bit. And then she binged. She was obese during a certain period of her life. She struggled with her own weight most of her life. And so I developed very unhealthy eating habits. We, like you, we were poor. We were poor. My mother made sure we always had food on the table, but we didn't always have the healthiest food. A lot of fried foods, a lot of potatoes and different things. And so as I kind of wrote about in the book, and as I looked back, I realized that as I was going into puberty, I didn't like my body, and I didn't like the changes, and I didn't know how to deal with them. I was a very active child. I was outside. I rode my horse. We lived on a farm. And so being outside, being with animals, that was where my comfort zone. And so as my body started to change, as I've stripped away all the layers and gotten really real with myself, I didn't want to change. I wanted to stay in my childhood body. And so as I had unhealthy eating habits and I began to binge, and then it became a solace, like you said, eating my feelings, stuffing them inside. And so then the binging became a problem because it's painful. It's uncomfortable. And then the guilt and the shame wash over you because you've eaten all this, and then there you are. And so the purging came next. So that came as a solution.
Many of you listeners are used to seeing GoFundMe when a loved one needs help with medical bills or a community is rebuilding after a wildfire or a hurricane. GoFundMe is a great place for those kinds of situations, but you can also use GoFundMe for all kinds of fundraising needs. For example, Pastor Glenn started a GoFundMe campaign after a man came into his church and pointed a gun at him. The church needed funds for security improvements in the building. Pastor Glenn's funds has raised over $2,700 to date. GoFundMe is the most trusted place to raise funds, chosen by over 150 million people. It only takes a few taps to get your fundraiser up and running. So next time you need help, whether it's for medical bills, if you're a college student needing help with tuition, a teacher needing help for classroom supplies, or a business owner needing help staying afloat through tough times, or anything else, just tap the green button to get started on GoFundMe. Everything you need to help your fundraisers succeed is here, with tips, resources, and AI tools to help you tell your story. It's free to start, free to manage, and designed to help you reach your goals. Start your fundraiser today by going to my special URL, gofundme.com/transform. That website again is gofundme.com/transform. What if you could take a weekly shot to lose weight and keep it off? If you've heard of Ozempic or Wegovy, you've probably heard three things. They're effective, but they're expensive, and they're hard to get. That's where Ro comes in. Through Ro, you can access prescription compounded GLP-1s with the same weight loss ingredients as brand name GLP-1s at a fraction of the cost. Ro has compounded GLP-1s in stock right now. You can get it in 1 to 4 days if you qualify. Ro members have support throughout the process. If eligible for medication, patients have access to their provider on demand for any questions. You can see if you qualify from the comfort of your own home. This means no schedule on a doctor's appointment, no commute to the doctor's office, and no waiting rooms. Go right now to ro.co/transform. Membership starts at just $99 for your first month. Medication costs are separate. That's ro.co/transform. Please note, go to ro.co/safety for black box warnings and full safety information. Compounded medication is not required to and does not receive FDA review or approval. RX only. One of my favorite memories as a kid was going camping. It began my love of nature and trees. As a mom, I want to share with my kids everything I loved about summertime and nature growing up. The parks, beaches, and camping trips. But with all these heat waves, wildfires, and storms, unnatural extreme weather events caused by fossil fuel pollution, the places we loved as kids are being threatened. The Science Moms are a nonpartisan group of scientists who are, like many of you, moms. Whether it's understanding the real cause of extreme weather or simply talking about it with friends and family, the Science Moms want you to know that a better future for our kids is possible. Human-made problems require human-made solutions, and no one is more equipped and motivated to lead the charge than our nation's millions of moms. Science shows us pollution is causing unnatural disasters that are making our world more dangerous. That's why I'm joining the millions of moms who are taking action to protect all we love. Join us at sciencemoms.com.
Now, how did you learn to purge? Because I don't even think I can do it. I've seen people stick their hand down their throat and throw up. Who taught you that? Or that's just something you learn automatically?
Well, I tell that too, but my brother that was 2 years older than me was in wrestling. And, they have to make weight. And, he was always kind of a little bit of a pudgy kid. and carried a little extra weight. And so then he would exercise and wear sweatsuits and spit into a cup. And then he taught himself to throw up.
Mm-hmm.
So as I was beginning to gain weight in puberty and binging and needed to find a way in my mind to escape that. And so it came as a solution to the binging because I was getting pudgy. I was getting chubby and I didn't like myself. And so now I'm going into puberty and I'm getting fat, chubby, whatever you want to call it. I have a really small body, so extra weight shows up on me really easy, and it doesn't, and so I asked him to show me how he did it. And I tell in the book that I will never tell the secret. I will never share it with anybody because I never want anybody to do it. But it's not sticking your finger down your throat. There's just a method that I learned that I wasn't very good at in the beginning, like anything, but I became much, much better at it. And so that's how the purging started until you purge all the time. You binge because of all of the things going on inside that you're either not dealing with or you don't know how to deal with. And then the purging started, and then the laxatives started, and it's a vicious cycle like any addiction. Mm-hmm. And you don't start it out as thinking, well, you just start out trying to find escape or a coping mechanism to what's going on in your life. And since so many things had happened to me, I had no idea how to handle them. And then you put puberty on top of it, and then you put weight gain on top of it, and you put, all of those things on top of it. And it was the perfect storm.
All right. So when did we get to the starving?
The starving came about in high school. I was a junior in high school, and I had grown up in the same small town for most of my school years. And then as a junior in high school, my mom lost the farm. Her and my uncle had gone into business, and that blew up and it fell apart. And so she moved me to another town, much larger town, and I was chubby, and the boys made fun of me. And I remember walking down the hallway and them laughing at my butt, my fat butt, quite frankly. And that...
Oh, hang on. Was that all in your head? Because I know people that are anorexic, they look in the mirror and they see that they're fat, but they're really not.
Right.
Is if you're purging, how did you get fat?
Right. Well, so because I developed all of them and they became interchangeable at some point. So the binging started first, then the purging. And most bulimics that binge and purge are of normal to even slightly overweight individuals. So I would put myself into that category at that time. Mm-hmm. And because I'm very small boned, I'm short, I have a small frame, 10 extra pounds on me. I probably had 15 at that time.
Okay.
So yeah, I was pudgy and they saw it and they made fun of me. And so
right.
I was in a new school and trying to be accepted and all of these things going on. And so that's when I started going without eating. That's when I wanted to lose weight. And so, the way I did it was as unhealthy as the way that I had binged and purged. And so I just didn't eat. And so I would not eat until I got home from school, have a little snack in the afternoon, maybe just dinner. And that would be pretty much what I would eat the whole day until I lost 10, 15 pounds. And I knew that I looked pretty good, but for me, finally I felt like I looked pretty good. But yeah, I've always felt like, I weighed too much or I need to lose weight. I still battle with it. I still deal with it. Just because I don't binge and purge or starve myself, it's a battle that I don't call it a battle because it's not. I'm aware of it. I'm cognizant of it. And then I've learned how to talk myself through it and to focus on things outside of myself. Okay. So that I don't go into that dark space again. So that's how and at that time when I was in high school, I call it It was like having a tool belt, and I had one more tool in my belt, in my arsenal, that I could pull out and use anytime, starvation, because most couldn't overcome being that hungry. And I'm like, okay, I know how to do it, and I can do it if I want to do it. And there it is.
Okay.
Now I binge, purge, and starve if I want to.
Okay. That's actually pretty good. I mean, I think that it takes a lot of mental fortitude to start results. Like you said, a lot of people can't do it. Well, so that brings up,
Not fun.
I know. But that brings up the mental part of this. So, you talk about anorexia and bulimia in your book and in the bio of the book. Were you ever diagnosed with any of that?
Oh, absolutely.
You were?
Yes. All of it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So for a listening audience, how does anorexia look? So we've just read your story. You felt that you're 10 pounds overweight, which is not a lot. That does not make you fat. 50 pounds or 100 pounds makes you fat. But 10 pounds doesn't really make you fat. But when you looked in the mirror, you saw that you were fat and the boys were laughing at you. You had a big butt. So how did that develop into anorexia? I mean, walk us through that.
Okay.
And what's the difference between anorexia and bulimia?
Absolutely. Well, that's good, since I, experienced all of them and interchangeably sometimes went through, different stages at different times. The same driving thing. So bulimia is when you purge, either, you binge essentially most of the time, and then that becomes an addiction. For me, it did. And then I learned to purge both through vomiting, self-vomiting, or use of laxatives. Abuse of laxatives would be a better word for it. And then the starving. So the binging or the bulimia is doing that, binging and purging, whatever methods that you use. So the anorexia is, and now I think they call it bulimorexia for bulimia, because they've made the tie between anorexia and bulimia, although not everybody that's a bulimic is anorexic or vice versa. But the anorexics, what happens is you starve yourself. You quit eating, or you eat very little, and you exercise, and no matter how much weight you lose, no matter how thin you are, it's never thin enough, and you become obsessed with it. And then until you can no longer tell reality. And, I'm sure that there were different times in my life when I was pretty thin and people would say something and I'd be like, no. Or they'd call me skinny and I'd be like, I'm not skinny. Like, I hated it called skinny. Actually, I'm small.
Okay.
I'm muscular.
Yeah.
Right, muscular. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm muscular. I'm small. But there were times but the truth is that as an anorexic, I loved my bones sticking out. I loved it. That's the truth. Hip bone sticking out. I talk about how my emaciated calves felt in my hands, and I loved it, and it felt powerful, and it felt like I ruled the world. I don't know how to tell you. It's scary. It's really scary to say that, but it is the truth of when my mind got to that place, the anorexia, and then it was control. Because if you can control your food, you can control anything. You can control yourself. And when your life feels out of control or other people control you, then it's the one thing in, that mind, that sick mind, frankly, that tells you this is my way of controlling myself or others, because then it becomes control kind of with others, quite frankly, as especially anorexia, as it develops and progresses.
When you think of the businesses that are selling through the roof, like Kim Kardashian's Skims or Justin Bieber's Drew House, You think about a great product or a cool brand with brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, including Skims and Drew House, that business is Shopify. Shopify helps you do your thing however you cha-ching. Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. So, if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business today and get the same checkout as Kim Kardashian's Skims. Sign up for $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/transform, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/transform to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/transform.
With the Inner Journey Mental Clarity app, we're transforming lives through mental fitness. Our mission is to make mental wellness accessible, actionable, and a daily habit for everyone within a supportive community. No judgment, no negativity, just community. We know you're managing stress, anxiety, memory, and performance, all while juggling work and family. Let us help you exercise your brain like you exercise your body. That's why we created the Inner Journey app, a neuroscience-backed mental fitness gym. What makes it special? We integrate neuroscience and psychology into every feature, from focus reps and quick 5-minute resets to our daily mental clarity routine. You're not just clearing your mind, you're strengthening it. Start your journey today and take control of your mental well-being. Download Inner Journey now and get 1 month free with promo code TYM. Your mind deserves this. For more information, visit innerjourneyapp.io. That is INNERJOURNEYAPP.io for a better mind, better habits, and a better you.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. I love learning about this stuff. I mean, again, I've only had a high level overview of it by seeing, people showing pictures of anorexia who look in the mirror and say they're fat. I knew of Princess Diana that would eat. I've heard of people talking about they eat a yogurt and then they run around the park to lose to lose the pounds from the yogurt. So I've heard about that. But yeah, this is the first time I've actually had a conversation with someone that's actually experienced that. So, all right. So your problem started when you're a teenager in middle school and high school. How long did it take you to fix it? And how did you start? What made you recognize that you have a problem that started in order to fix it? I know that you have come up with 21 recovery lessons and it's in your book. Well, before we get to how you got to recovery, give us the middle part. What made you realize that, watching your bones stick out is not good?
Right. Well, I knew I had a problem with the binging. I mean, people that binge are very well aware that it's a problem, and it becomes a bigger problem. It becomes uncontrollable, and it becomes an addiction, whether they ever purge or not. But when you binge, it's like somebody else takes over your body, and it's all, at least for me, it was like stepping outside of my body, watching myself do the binging and being unable to stop it until either you were so incredibly full or then you go and purge and then you go back and binge. And then it became a cycle where nothing stayed in my stomach. So either I didn't eat or then I binged and then I purged until when I reached college. By the time I reached college, pretty much nothing stayed in my stomach. I had no idea. I threw up everything all the time.
Wow. Even when you didn't want to. Wow.
because I was
Yeah.
so
Your stomach has got that reflex now because your things are going the opposite way. Right. Okay.
it was just such an addiction,
Mhm.
such an addiction that then you become so uncomfortable with food sitting in your stomach that even a cup of coffee, I would go throw up a cup of coffee.
Wow.
Yeah, and I would, yeah, all times of day, I would get up at night sometimes and binge and purge. It was completely, so there was no doubt in my mind that there was a problem.
Problem.
You
Right.
know, then later in life, towards the end, I pulled out that you go in between eating, not eating. I would say the bulk of my 13 years was spent binging and purging, intermittently with the starving. And then at one point, I made up my mind later that I was just going to starve myself. I consciously I made the decision because food becomes your enemy. It's no longer your friend. It controls you, but you somehow think that it gives you control. But it doesn't. It's a false sense of control until you become in this vicious cycle, like any addiction, where then you have shame and guilt, and then you binge, purge, starve, or what. And when I starved, I didn't really have the shame and the guilt, but when I binged and purged, overwhelming shame and guilt after you would be done, after you promised yourself you wouldn't, just like
Yeah. Right.
act says I'll never use again, or an alcoholic, I'll never drink again. And then you do, because with food, you have to eat every day, or it's you can go without drinking or doing drugs and live, but eventually you can't go without food. And so you're faced with it and these decisions, and it just becomes an all consuming thing.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Yes, this is serious stuff. All right, let's get to the solution. Walk us through. So you recognize that you had a problem because you're binging. You recognize you had a problem because you go want to throw up a cup of coffee, which really has no calories. So I know if you're an alcoholic, you can go to AA or something and get some 12 steps. But somebody that's, identifying with you right now that's listening that has an eating disorder, what do they do? Go to a psychiatrist? What is the steps to solve this problem? So let's talk now about your 21 recovery lessons. We don't obviously need to talk about 21, but give us like the first step that you would go to stop this cycle.
Yes. Well, and through the years, I got a lot of counseling and professional help. And in the book, I truly encourage it for families, for individuals. And the earlier you catch it, and usually it's a family dynamic, potentially. People can come from all walks of life, rich, poor, doesn't matter, race, creed, color, male, female, it doesn't matter. It can happen. And it's a disease of, and I call that disease
Right.
in your body, in yourself, in your mind, that creates it. So I highly encourage. In fact, I talk about in my book that this is not meant to take the place of, I'm not a counselor, although I've certainly been through a lot in my life and I've learned a lot of great things, but to use it in conjunction. So the first step would be to recognize that you have a problem, which you're probably very well aware that you do, especially if you binge and purge, and wanting and being, wanting to get help. I think that's the next thing. And learning about yourself, speaking your truth. What, for me, the biggest step in recovery, besides counseling and journaling and things, was to speak my truth. And I think that was the big thing that I had disconnected from myself. What was my truth? And so I remember after I had stopped binging and purging, after that, I still continued to starve myself. But I had stopped binging and purging, and I got free of that. I tell the story, which was actually a miracle. I was set free in a moment, but I still had to deal with everything. But it was getting real. So I remember after I had stopped binging and purging, and literally I stopped in one day. That was it. From that day forward, the good Lord set me free, and I tell the story, although the book isn't about religion or faith, it just tells my story. But I would be amiss if I didn't talk and give credit to the good Lord. Now, not everybody gets a miracle, and I still had to deal with all of the aftermath and all of the stuff that was still in there. And I spent, all of those years doing that, but getting real. And I remember after I had stopped binging and purging, and then maybe I overate, or I just maybe didn't even overeat, but I was sitting with friends and I said, "Can I go throw up?" And that was my truth. That's what I wanted to do. But for the first time in my life, I was honest about it. I spoke it. I said it. Of course, I said it in a joking manner. They knew that I had a problem, and they all laughed. And once they realized I was just kidding, I'm like, I'm just kidding. But I want to. But speaking that truth, putting it out there and owning it, took away the power. It took away the power of hide and secrecy, and so speaking your truth and finding what things inside of yourself that you need to deal with. Because I say that if you have an eating disorder, something is eating you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can take a really long time to figure out, because it's layers. So as a child, and I started out, that was a layer, and then the control with the food, and then this layer went on this layer, went on this layer, went on this layer, until I was so, like I said, walled off and in myself that I kind of just disconnected, and I wasn't connected to who I was, what I felt, what I thought, what I wanted, because it had taken over my entire life. And getting back in touch with those things. And that's part of what the recovery lessons take you through. Some lessons people will think, well, what does this have to do with my eating disorder? Because it's about getting you outside of, not only figuring out what's eating you, but then also getting you outside of all of that to put your focus on other things, connecting with your food in positive ways, nourishing yourself with food, being gentle with yourself, and believing that you are worthy, that you are, I watched your podcast on You Are Capable, that you are capable, that, all those things that you talk about of transforming your mind. And that's basically what I think the 21 recovery lessons are. But I talk about creativity, using creativity to deal with some of the things, and express your emotions, your feelings, besides just eating them, pushing them all down. And then the purging, what most people don't understand, you get visions of purging of, being sick and having an upset stomach and then throwing up. The purging for me was actually very pleasant. And that was the addiction, because
I will tell you that I hate throwing up. Because once you start, you can't stop, and your stomach goes like this. And I will tell you that, I'm sure it happens to everybody. When you feel like you naturally want to throw up, there's some stuff that comes up in your mouth, and you were saying, no, I don't want to throw up. I've got to stuff this down, because throwing up is a very unpleasant thing. So when you were taking something unpleasant and making it pleasant, I guess what you're doing is saying, okay, well, that food is gone. So that's the pleasant. But the act is, there's nothing pleasant about that. Retching is nothing pleasant about that.
It's different. It was different. And what it was releasing all the emotions. So the bit is stuffing everything inside.
Oh, and the other one is releasing. That's good. Yes.
Releasing all the emotions that basically you're not dealing with, or I didn't deal with. And so that's why the cycle continues, partially because there's all of these things that in my life that weren't dealt with, I didn't know how to deal with in a healthy way. And so using all kinds of other things, and that's what the recovery lessons are, in a lot of different ways, and things that I've learned and coping mechanisms, to focus on other things outside of myself while still learning healthy ways to deal with what's going on inside, and getting really in touch with what is going on inside. And what do I need to say? What do I need to say to myself? Is there something I need to say to somebody else? Writing it down, getting it out, instead of keeping it all in and becoming walled up.
Wow.
It's secrecy. The crux of bulimia and purging is secrecy. It's done in secret, done in private. You hide from yourself. You hide from others. You hide from the truth. All of those things. And then, the starving is a whole nother ball game. That's a whole other.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you just said something amazing just now, because eating disorders is the same as any other kind of addiction. It's whether it's alcohol or whatever, you're trying to self-medicate and you're trying to make yourself feel better. And the bad thing about it is that you're right. Your body needs to be nourished. I mean, we don't have time to get into what all those years of abuse and not having nutrition in your body did to you, but it's not good. And I'm assuming you still don't like eggs, so.
I'm very well, but I eat them.
You eat them now?
My choice now.
Okay, all right. It's your choice now. Right, because egg is a very nutritious thing. It's like the most complete nutrition thing that you can eat is, egg. So that's amazing. But before I ask you about why you wrote the book, something has been popping into my head, for the entire conversation, and I think I need to lay it on the table here. So eating disorders don't always start from, trauma.
Right.
Sometimes eating disorders start from, maybe you're in puberty and you're fatter and you want to, like someone is laughing at your butt, boys making fun of you, or models that need to keep their weight, or even you talk about your brother that he is, needs to eat, make weight, or boxers, or any of those people that just need to not eat so that they can gain a certain weight. Do you have a response for that? You probably didn't touch about it in your book because that was not your experience. But what would you say to someone that it's bulimic, for instance, because it started off that they wanted to be 100 pounds or something for a modeling gig? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Dancers, ice skaters, anybody who, even athletes that are in limelight, all have pressure to be what our idea in society of perfect is acceptable. And then they put so much pressure upon themselves to be perfect, to act perfect, to look perfect, or somebody even maybe just one derogatory comment, or, actresses in particular, I've heard.
Yeah.
They really get I heard really negative comments about some of the, about Simone Biles on Facebook and her hair. And out of everything else that this amazing, beautiful, fabulous young woman overcame and did, like, the one thing you pick on about her is her hair. Like, you didn't like, so what? It's not a beauty contest. Even if it was, she's fabulously beautiful. So even at that level of beauty, talent, power, strength, accomplishment, people can find things to pick on or tear apart, of maybe because they're in them of themselves or happy or whatever. But I think you have to just develop this really great sense of capability of yourself, of really solid, like, this is who I am. I like me. I am good at these things. I am capable. I excel, and just standing on that, and regardless of what other people think and do. But it becomes, maybe just an innocent thing that they do, and then it can take over the life. And then it's really, really sad, because then that becomes your life and all other wonderful things. So I don't know if there's one thing I could say to them other than those around those types of people, help them see other things in themselves that you admire, that you respect, that you think are good or attractive. And this idea of perfection, if I'm 100 pounds, I mean, that was my thing. I always wanted, wanted to be 100 pounds. Like first it was 110, then 105, and then 100. And then, where does it stop?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's actually what's going on right now. You mentioned Simone Biles, but that was, I mean, social media is cruel. I would look at a post on Instagram, and me personally would think this is just a good thing. It's making me cry. And someone is a whole bunch of people are going to have some really negative comments. I mean, I'm thinking, where do these people come from? But one of the ones that came to my mind when you started talking was Kylie Jenner. Because I think everybody's taking this Ozempic now, and she looked terrible. I looked at her and I'm thinking, when is this going to stop? Why does everybody want to be anorexic? Because I know that she is an influencer, and when she becomes looking anorexic, then all the little girls are going to want to be it. So, I mean, I'm not a negative person, so I didn't comment. I didn't say anything on the post, but I looked at it and I thought to myself, what is she doing? But then she went on social media crying, not at social media, she went in an interview crying that people shouldn't comment on how people look, that it was cruel. And I'm thinking, well, you made that happen for yourself. You know what I mean? But I see exactly what you mean, that it's very hard when she's saying that you shouldn't criticize somebody from the way they look. But that's a totally different conversation, because I mean, I think if you don't want people to criticize the way you look, then you shouldn't be in social media looking like 90 pounds or whatever she was at the time. But but all right. So yes, it's not only, eating disorders don't only come from, trauma. It comes from wanting to look, because everybody, even J-Lo, I mean, she was the most beautiful woman, perfect. And then all of a sudden, she starts looking anorexic too, because everybody discovered this new drug and everybody wants to be 100 pounds. Nobody wants to be 120 anymore. 100 pounds is what they feel they should be. And it's very unhealthy. So, all right. So then I can throw that in there. Go ahead.
Give yourself permission, as a woman, to be a woman. I think that's a big thing. I'm a woman and I have curves, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
And that, especially as an athlete or a dancer or somebody, the pursuit of perfection. But the reverse of that would be allowing yourself to be powerful and strong and athletic and all the things that you need to be your best. And that's a little bit different maybe for everybody. But you're right. Then the ideal, somebody that everybody admires or respects or follows or whatever, a role model, they become potentially unhealthy. And then that becomes our new norm.
Yes.
Oh, I want like her. And,
exactly.
And
that's the problem I had with it, right? Because she is an influencer. She's got like 1 billion people following her. Right. Yes. Okay. Some great conversation. So what, I know you've got a great story to tell, and it's always great when you have a story. You're also, spiritual. You talked about getting a miracle. And one of the things that I know is God gives you a test so that you can have a testimony. So tell us, why did you write Starving, Binging, Purging, the story of how I recovered from an eating disorder, and you can too? What was your motive, and what do you want people to walk away with after reading your book?
Thank you for that. I believe I was called to write the book from the good Lord.
Yes.
That I didn't want to write the book, quite frankly. I put off writing the book for several years because of the potential impact it could have on my close family, and not wanting to be honest and put things out there that maybe were not that flattering. both for myself and, my family. But I couldn't not write the book. It just kept coming up. You need to write the book. You need to write the book. You need to tell your story. You need to help people.
Yes, I do.
Help people because there are suffering people. I feel their pain. So as I wrote the introduction, I literally started weeping. Not just crying, I mean weeping. And I thought, why am I crying? I've dealt with all of this. I've taught, why? And I realized that I wasn't weeping for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was weeping for my readers, for the people that are in the crux, in that place, that are, controlled by this and that are living this addiction and don't know how to get out of it. And I know what that feels like, to suffer so much and to want out of it and just not be able to get out of it. And that is the power of the book that I hope. So I tell my story, and then the second part is recovery, because everybody loves drama. Everybody loves to, hear all the gore or whatever. I mean, we do. We're people. We're human. We like the drama.
Yeah.
So I try to give the drama and the story, the truth, the way that I saw it. But then also to spend a lot of time on recovery and the things that I do still today, every day, every single day, Myrna, I do some of the things in the recovery, things that I've learned to do that help me keep myself free of it and keep myself healthy and happy and, outside of myself and hopefully open and a good role model, hopefully, to people everywhere, to say that you can recover. I think giving people hope, because when you're in it, whether it's depression or addiction or an eating disorder or anything, the one thing that you need is hope. Hope. Like if she did it, if she overcame it and it was that bad, I can. And that burning hope is what I want to pass on, that you can do it. You are capable. That you are loved. You are good enough. You are lovable. All of those things. And then I've spent a lot of years transforming my mind, as you talk about, so that when those negative things come in, I can overcome them. I can talk myself out of them. I can get outside of myself and go for a walk or if I'm exhibiting some unhealthy things, I can question myself and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? What's bothering you? Let's talk about this, even to myself. Let's write about this. Let's get this out. Let's do whatever we need to do to be happy, healthy, and help other people. Because seeing somebody, very few people ever, I think I read the statistic that only 31% of anorexics recover in the big picture. Most of them suffer if they the fatal. It's one of the worst eating disorders. It has the highest fatality.
Yeah.
But being free of it, where it doesn't control me, it doesn't mean I don't deal with it, but it means that my mind now knows, oh, you're going to that place. You go there. And then I do things to keep myself and go, okay. And I develop, even as I was writing the recovery lessons, I was like, oh, I need to do that, more of that. I need to do that again. So even as simple, Myrna, fixing yourself something really good to eat, that's good for your body, that's good for you, that nourishes you, your heart, your soul. Like food is so much more than just eating and putting it in your mouth. And I think that's part of what people lose touch with, and getting back in touch with that and making friends with food is a lot of what the recovery lessons are about. And sitting at the table, I set myself a table. I put the food in front of me. I make myself sit on a chair and look at my food and experience my food and smell my food and appreciate my food, give thanks for my food, and then believe that I deserve this wonderful meal. It's so much different than just standing at the counter stuffing stuff in my mouth until I make myself go throw up. That's a whole different picture.
Right.
And people can. I mean, I did. So
yeah.
That's what I hope.
No, that's pretty good. I love that. I love this conversation, and I love the fact that, yeah, you can give people hope, and addiction controls you. And, this podcast is called Transform Your Mind. It works in so many areas of your life because the mind is where everything starts. And one of the great things about the mind, or anything that's controlling you, is a lot of times it controls you and you're not even aware of it. 99% of people are at autopilot. They don't live consciously. But whenever you become aware of something, it loses its control over you. So what you're talking about here is saying, yes, I'm aware that, food is trying to control me. I'm aware that these triggers are here that's trying to control me. So now that I'm aware of it and I'm looking you straight in the face, then you start to release, it starts to release this hold on you. And I love what you said, where you're sitting at a table and you call it speaking your truth, but it's also talking to the mind, right? When you say, I want to go throw up, but I'm not going to. You can't make me. Because, that's what it does, and listen, our brain, which is where all this control comes from, you've got to work with it. And yeah, so I like the fact that you were, this was your mission from God to write this book, to tell your story, to help people. And the recovery lessons are yes, because whenever you got a disease or a mental illness or anything that you have, you can't get rid of it without doing the work. You have to do the work. It doesn't go away. So your recovery lessons is doing the work, and it's usually an ongoing thing, because once your brain is changed, it's always going to try to get back. You know what I mean? And you've got to make a conscious effort. I remember I had a boyfriend once that was a crack addict, and he tells me that once you take crack, every day you wake up and your brain is asking for it, you've got to say no. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing with food. You know what I mean? It's something that's put in front of you every day. So you're being reminded of, hey, should I binge or eat all this pizza? I think I was reading a book the other day, and Rebel Wilson was talking about her eating disorders, and she would eat the whole pizza or two of them.
Yeah.
Because she could stop. So those are some of the things that people do. So yeah. So Cynthia, this was an excellent conversation. I absolutely enjoyed this interview. I enjoyed learning things along with my audience. And I've learned a lot today about eating disorders and how they start. And, without reading your book, I can understand that you've got to work at it every day to keep it at bay. So thank you for being on the show and sharing your story. And you guys, listen, if you're overweight at all, you might not be purging or something, but you probably have an eating disorder. So go pick up a copy of Cynthia's book, Starving, Binging, Purging. It's very easy to remember, but I will have a transcript of my conversation with Cynthia on the show page, which is myhelps.us, and I will link out to her book. So if you missed something, you can head over to the show page and, reread the transcript and definitely get a copy of her book. Now, as we wrap up, Cynthia, any last words, anything else you want to leave behind for our listening audience?
Yeah, I want to let people know that the paperback, if the recovery lessons have space in there to write your answers if you want. Of course, you could get the Kindle, which I have on sale right now at only $2.99. But the paperback, that physical copy, there are lines for you to write in it, like in a workbook style. That's how I did the recovery lessons. Certainly you could do it with a journal, but I spent a lot of time thinking about the right questions to ask yourself as you go through. Some may be relevant, some not, but I wanted them to know that about the paperback, and that the second half really is kind of like a workbook with questions and a quote. And I explain how I apply it to my own life, how I use it. And then I get some pretty good questions in there for them to work with themselves and to ask themselves, that hopefully will be helpful to them.
Well, I'm sure it will be. Because it starts you doing the work. Like I said, it starts by shining a light, because a lot of times you don't know. You went right back to your mother having you sit at the table and eat your eggs and eat your food. I mean, most people don't go all the way back there. They just, recognize that maybe they have an eating disorder when they get to puberty, because when you get to puberty is when your body changes and you're interested in boys, and it's a big thing right then. And if you're overweight or chubby, as you want to call it, then you might start this eating disorder then. But they don't go back to maybe when they were a child and, the reason, or maybe someone said something to them. You talked about the guys talking about your big old butt. That wouldn't happen today, because a big old butt is what everybody wants.
Yeah. I'm like, what? I was trying to get rid of that, and that's what I'm supposed to want? Like, I got this all wrong. Good grief.
I'm gonna get old butt. That's the end thing these days.
I'm telling you.
So, but yeah, a lot of people don't go back there. In order for them to go back there, they've got to do the work. You've got to shine a light on it. And awareness is key. Awareness is key. Consciousness is key. So, right. All right, guys, this has been a pleasure for me to bring Cynthia to you today on her book. I mean, we're talking with a niche audience here. But I'm sure a great many of you will identify with her story. And if it does, then you need to do the work to fix yourself. Because like she says, nourishing food is important to a healthy body. And if you don't, give your body nourishing food, sooner or later, it's gonna conk out, right? Because it needs nourishment. So thanks again for tuning in. Thank you for Cynthia for being on the show. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment. Tell us your story. Tell us, how this interview helped you. If you're watching on iTunes, we'd love for you to give a rating and a review as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. Until next time, namaste.